I want to start off with a little allegory. Space alien comes to town. You run into the space alien. Space alien says, "Ah, Earth, nice place you got here. What do you do for fun?" And you say, "Well, we go to concerts." And the alien says, "Oh, what's a concert?" Alien speaks English. And you say, "Oh, concert, let's see. Okay, so there's a big room, and there's a lot of people, and we go in, and we sit down, and they turn off the lights, and in a corner of the room, some people make noise." And the alien says, "Oh my goodness, they must pay you." And you say, "Well, no, we pay a handsome sum to do that." And the alien says, "Well, how long do you have to do that?" And he says, "Oh no, we do it for 2 hours." And the alien says, "Well, I just have one question. Why? Why would we pay a handsome sum and give up 2 very valuable hours to sit in a dark room and listen while people make noise in a corner?" What an odd thing to do. Okay, so let's leave that. Why? I want to talk about art. We go to the museum. We consider a painting. We take in the image. We absorb the image or the component images. They sink in. We lose ourselves in the image. We become the image. Not in physical reality, of course, but in that act of consciousness. In that act of consciousness, the subject and the object cancel each other out. And what remains is my consciousness, the essence of who I am. So this experience allows me to be in touch with my essence. People say that art can allow you to touch your soul, and in a very real way that's true. And the same is true of music. Given sounds that allow it. So I hear the sounds. They wash over me. I take them in. I absorb myself in the sounds. I lose myself in the sounds. I become the sounds. In a very real way, and in a transcendent way, I transcend the duality between me and the sounds out there. And while I haven't become the sounds, in reality, in this conscious act, I've become the sounds. In this conscious act, I can touch the very essence of my being. And so there's a story that I read that is surely apocryphal, because I read it on a record jacket, but it's a wonderful story. That Handel led a performance of Messiah late in his life, and someone came to him and said, "Well, Maestro, you have surely provided a great entertainment." And he said, "I should be sorry if I only entertained them, for I had hoped to make them better." And that's what music can do. It can make us better. Why do we sit in a dark room and listen to people make noise for 2 hours? Because for some of that time, we can absorb the sounds and be better. Okay. How? Well, that's the essence of the issue. So a musical experience has 3 contributors. There's the listener, there's the performer, and there's the composer. And each of the 3 have to contribute for this optimal experience, for the maximal experience of beauty to take place. The listener contributes by listening, by being open to the sounds, but by being open to all the sounds and only the sounds. So, for example, we might have, let's consider a negative example. So I'm listening and I'm thinking, oh, well, you know, the Toscanini recording, it's a little different, it's a little slower, it's a little faster. Well, in that act of my consciousness, in that conscious act, so, all right, I'm the subject, but the object of my consciousness is the relationship of these sounds to the Toscanini recording. So that's external to me. It also requires me as listener to absorb all the sounds. It's entirely possible to sit and think, oh, I'm going to listen to that beautiful clarinet melody. Or now it's the second theme. Or the brass section. But in any of those conscious acts, any of those require me to make that decision. I am the subject, I have to be in there. I have to make the decision to limit the object to the clarinet or the second theme or the brass. And so for the maximal experience of beauty to take place, it requires me to absorb all the sounds and only the sounds in a single act of consciousness. In order for me to be able to do that, the sounds have to allow it. And in order for me to absorb the sounds in a single act of consciousness, the sounds have to come to me in some way as whole, as singular. So there are a number of elements of wholeness in a performance. For example, intonation. It has to be in tune. All the tones have to participate in the same singular system of intonation. It's probably better said they have to not be out of tune, because there's a range of pitches within which something doesn't sound out of tune, but it has to be within that range. Ensemble. All the tones have to come within the same metric system. Why? Because if it's out of tune, it becomes a multiplicity, and we have to, in some way, we actually have to make the connection. Oh, that's an out-of-tune tone that should be there. I'm sure you've all had that experience when you hear something that's out of tune, and it just comes into one. And then when it gets in tune, all these disparate events melt into one, sucks you in, coming to one. But the overarching component, the overarching determinant of wholeness has to do with energy. So let me talk about energy in the physical world. We imagine a simple pendulum, like a child's swing. I push the swing, boom. I inject a force. The push is a force that injects energy into the string, into the swing. Little by little, it releases that energy through friction to return to equilibrium. Now, I could keep the swing oscillating at the same amplitude. How? By injecting more force with each oscillation. How much more force? Exactly as much as would otherwise have been lost, or was in fact lost, to friction. So I give it force each time, keeps the energy sustained, keeps the motion, keeps the amplitude the same. I can increase the amplitude of those oscillations. How? By injecting more force with each oscillation. How much more force? More than was lost to friction. So I give it more force and more and more, but as soon as I stop injecting force, that swing is going to lose energy and ultimately return to equilibrium. Music works in a very similar way. Sound is a force that injects energy in our consciousness of it. So I play a tone. It is a force that injects energy in my consciousness of it. And, like the energy in the swing, it must die. The equilibrium of sound is silence. And any sound injects a force in our consciousness. Any sound that is a force that injects energy in our consciousness will ultimately die. The future of that energy is silence. Must be. So a sound is a kind of struggle. It's a fight against silence. Any sound exists only to the extent that it successfully fights the ultimate return to silence. It's a fight. Now, just like the swing, I could keep the sound, I could maintain this force. Imagine this is a sustaining instrument. I could keep it going. But as soon as I stop, the energy remains in our consciousness for a little while. Right? If you totally focus, absorb the sound, and then it's gone. It dies. Now, I could increase the force and thus increase the energy in my consciousness. How? I could play louder. And it has longer before it dies. I could increase it with pitch. I've increased the energy. I could increase it with rhythmic density. The closer the tones come together, the more the energy increases. So, I could increase it with harmony. Those four elements that I just discussed, so volume, rhythmic density, pitch, and harmony, those are the composer's four tools of creating energy. Principal four tools. There are a couple of minor ones. Articulation, timbre. But those are the four business tools that a composer has. But I talked about wholeness. And I talked about wholeness in terms of energy. And musical articulation can be experienced as whole when the energy created is released consequently. In other words, as a consequence. Or said in a different way, when the music and the energy end at the same time. So, for example, if I create energy with pitch, I need to release that energy. If I create more energy, I need a longer resolution. It takes more time to resolve the energy I create. I could create some energy and not resolve it. The music stopped and the energy's hanging on. I could create some energy and let the energy die way before the music ends. Energy is long gone. So it's about creating energy and playing it out. I could say I could do this with rhythmic density too. Something like that. So I said the composers, those are the 4 tools that the composer has: pitch, rhythmic density, volume, and harmony. We performers have 2 tools, 2 major tools. Minor ones, articulation, sound quality, but the overwhelming majority of the tools that we have to affect the structure of energy is volume and rhythmic density. But now, why do we need to do that? Because if the composer already gives it to us, why do we need to? Well, here's a little example. So here's a little phrase. Opening of Beethoven Third Piano Concerto. I'm going to try and play this just completely flat. Wow, quite deadly. Quite unmusical. So my job as a performer is to give this articulation a dynamic structure, dynamic in the sense of energy, to create the energy and play it out such that I can absorb this unit as one whole in a single undivided act of consciousness. In other words, so it can be beautiful. Very simple process. I find out where the grouping is, and then I determine where does the climax of the energy have to come so that the energy I create can be played out within the grouping. Or in other words, where does the height of the energy have to come such that the music and the energy end at the same time? Well, the grouping is clear. Beethoven nicely gives us this little self-contained grouping. So I could think, well, let's see. What happens if I put the height of this energy on the last tone? And I do that with my tool of volume. Now, just for fun, close your eyes and be in touch with the energy that's created, and when you feel it finally playing out, just raise your hands. Yeah, slightly different, but actually, well, you guys must have, you here were right all at the very much exactly the same time. A couple a little later, but that's fine. That's good. So it absolutely took a fair amount of time for all that energy to go. But there's a problem because Beethoven gives us this. I'll do the same way. He doesn't, okay, so there's not enough time. In order to, if the height of the energy comes on that last tone, well, it's not played out before we start again with the next group. So then let's move it back. Okay, so we have to move it back. So let's put it to the second C when we come down to the C. Let's do that same thing. Close your eyes and just hear where that energy finally plays out. Yeah, let's do it one more time. Yeah, from most of you, it was actually then still later than the next bar where the next entrance has to come in. And so we have to move it further back. Well, in this case, it's a little bit, Beethoven kind of gives it to us on a platter because he gives us this ascending motion opening up. And I think we will find that if the height of the energy comes here, then we can play it out. And then we can go on. And that itself is interesting because we have one group, one unit. But energy is hierarchical. So that this group has a structure, and the next group has a structure similar. And then there's a unit of the two groups. So between this and this, in this higher unit, well, the energy comes with the A flat. And then he goes on. So let's just recap. So it's possible to absorb sound and be moved and be better. In order to do that, we have to be open to those sounds, open to all the sounds, and only the sounds. But the sounds have to allow it. And they allow it if they come to us as whole. And among the other determinants of this wholeness, this singularity, the overarching one is the structure of energy, the hierarchical structure of energy, such that within each unit, the energy we create is played out fully or consequently. And those units are hierarchical. And ultimately, within the whole piece being a unit itself, within the whole movement, that the energy we create globally over the course of the whole movement, we can play out then over the course of that move, over the remainder of that movement. And we have two primary tools to do that. One is volume, and one is rhythmic density. So we've heard volume. Generally, the louder we get, the more energy we create. Rhythmic density, generally, the more dense the rhythm, in other words, the shorter the tones get to each other, or in other words, the faster we go, the more energy we create. And the less dense the tones are, the more energy we can play out. So let me play a little piece, a whole piece. It's small, but it's really wonderful piece of music. And this is the melody by Robert Schumann from the album For the Young. So it's a little 8-bar piece. An 8-bar piece breaks down into 3 large sections, and each section breaks down. So the first of the 3 sections is 4 bars. And then we have the middle section. And then a final section, which is essentially a reprise of the first. So the process of coming to understand how can we put these tones forth so that they're whole? How can we put these tones forth in the most beautiful way so that the energy we create, we play out? It's a 2-part process. As we did before, we find where's the grouping and where do we have to put the climax of the energy. So the first grouping I think we'll find is, so we could say, well, let me think. We could put the height of the energy, that's the end of the grouping, and there's still energy hanging on. I think ultimately we'll find that in order for this grouping to come to us as whole, the height of the energy has to come with that first tone. Schumann actually gives us a little bit of goose in the middle of that. But then we have the next 2 bars. Well, again, we could try energy hanging on. Well, more energy hanging on. So we have to put it further back. So let's go try it again at the beginning. And then we go on in the middle section. So we have and I think we'll find that in order to make this whole, this has to be the climax of that section. And then similarly, the final section. But there's actually something interesting. So we've made these groupings with volume. But the middle section we actually can't play out all the energy created with volume alone. So I'm going to play this just absolutely straight. Something's wrong. It doesn't hold together. Because there's so much energy created here, we have to play it out before the end of the grouping so that we can go on. Now, just like before, so I played it. I didn't play out enough energy. I could play out too much energy. we'd say, well, no, that's mannered. Mannered, but what does it mean? It means that the energy died before we got to the end of the music. So what's the right amount? I don't know. Somewhere to play out all the energy. So that's the challenge of any performer. How can we put forth these tones so that we, as the performer, and also as a listener, can be moved, and so that someone will want to pay money to spend 2 hours to listen to us? But we're conductors. So let's talk about this strange business of conducting. The first question is, why do we even need a conductor? Playing a string quartet. String quartets make music, fantastic music. No conductors needed. Quintets, sextets, octets. Someone plays, and the people playing in the ensemble, they respond on the basis of hearing. They hear the system of intonation and they join. They hear the pulse, the collective pulse, and they join. They hear the necessity of taking more time or less time. They hear it. But they also have visual confirmation, because everyone playing has, at least internally and often externally, some physical response to the sounds. Some physical response to the pulse, some physical response to the quality of the sound. And when you're in a group, you're playing on the basis of your hearing, but you have that visual confirmation. Confirming. And why do we need a conductor? It's really practical. It's very simple. When the ensemble gets so large that every member of the ensemble doesn't have visual contact with every other. And so when the ensemble gets so large that each person can't see each other, then it's helpful to have someone standing in front who has visual contact with every player. So ultimately, we are another musician on stage. We are responding to the needs of the sound, the demands of the sound, just as every playing musician on stage. And we are that visual confirmation of the sounds. So of course we are the least influential person because we don't make any sounds. But we become the most influential person, let me say the most influential musician, because we have contact with everyone. And we also have some advantages because we're unencumbered by the need to play an instrument, so that we can be a full physical manifestation of the musician's physical response to sounds. So ultimately, we can make the best music if we enable the musicians, if we empower them, if we guide them, if we usher them, if we join them in their response to the sounds. So there are 5 things that we need to do as a conductor. And number 1 is by far the most important, and that's to come to the podium with an understanding of how these tones can come to life to make this most magical, most moving, most beautiful experience. That's just the conditions in sound. That's almost everything. If you can do that, you can get away with not so much of the rest. But the rest can be important, actually. So, second thing we have to do, stand up straight. Because if I talk to you from this standing position, I have one kind of magnetism. But if I stand up straight, I have a different kind of your attention. We need to have a presence on the podium. We need to be part of people's attention. we need to stand up straight. We need to open, to free our minds to connect with all the sounds, or to hear everything. Free the mind, hear everything. In other words, to allow all the sounds, each and every sound, to register with us, to work on us. 4, we need to free the body. And by freeing the body, I mean we need to get rid of any unnecessary tension in how we move. Muscles work in one way. They contract. The function of muscles is to move bones, the skeletal muscle system. The function of the skeletal muscles is to move bones, and they work in one way. They contract. So it's kind of like a pulley system. So if I want to move, well, let's say I want to move this finger. So if I want to move this finger this direction, there are muscles that attach here and in here, and I contract them. And therefore I can move. Now, if I want to move back the other way, these muscles are out of the picture, I just have to release them, but there are also muscles that attach here and through here, and I contract those, and I can go back that way. So when we move our arms, we want to use only the ones we need. So to move this hand here, I need muscles that attach here and here. But there are other muscles that I don't need. I don't, for example, need this muscle that abducts the upper arm. I don't need the upper pectoral and the trapezius muscles that elevate my shoulder. And these are the 3 most common muscles that people use that they don't need. And why do people use these muscles? Well, have you seen a small child learn to walk? They walk kind of like this, a toddler, they toddle. Right? They use all their muscles. And little by little, they figure out, okay, I don't need that one, I don't need that one. They're not conscious of it, but they come to understand. And that's true of all of our motions. But it's the very, very rare human being, and I will tell you, I've never met one, I certainly was not one, who learns to use, to move efficiently, only using the muscles that they need. And we all carry with us these vestigial muscle tensions. So we want to learn how to raise our arms using only those muscles that we need, not this one and not that one. Why? Because it gets in our way, in a few ways. And we'll go into that in a little bit later. So we've come to the podium, we have an understanding of how the most beautiful music can take, how these tones can allow this most beautiful experience. And we're standing up straight. And we've freed the mind. We're hearing all the tones. And we've freed the body. Then be the music.